Welcome to Lisa's Italian Kitchen. Tonight I'm making for you such a fun, delicious, and simple dessert, Tuscan apple cake. Few ingredients, comes out perfect every time. So I've started with an 8-inch pan and I've just melted a tablespoon of butter. What I'm going to do now is sprinkle, and this is a tip from northern Italy. A lot of cakes begin with this. Just about 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs on the butter, on the bottom of the pan. The reason they do this is, number one, the cake does not stick, and number two, it gives it kind of a crunchy bottom or top when you flip it to the cake. Now remember, dessert in Italy is very rarely sweet. We kind of like a moderate sweet dessert. So the breadcrumbs are in line with that. So I'm going to put this down here. What I'm going to do now is I have 3 apples peeled, cored, and sliced. We're going to arrange the apples in a circle, and you're going to have enough apples to make at least 2 layers. So don't get worried when you think, oh, the pan is so small, it's only an 8-inch. But what's great about this is the dough has yeast in it. So the cake is going to come out fairly high, and you're gonna see all these beautiful layers and beautiful layers and cuts of apple designed sort of just in a beautiful half circle design like this. So just whatever design you wanna make with the apples, just place them in here. And then we're going to have enough for a second layer. Now, I like to use Honeycrisp or Braeburn apples. The reason I like to use these is they really retain their crunch and they're very flavorful. So although they're going to bake and become softer in the cake, you don't want an apple that's going to become mushy. And the Granny Smith for me in this recipe, just a little too tart. So I'd go with something like a Honeycrisp or a Braeburn. So here we go. We have our 3 apples all arranged in a nice design, and then we're going to set this aside. Now remember, this is an 8-inch pan. So if you can use a 9-inch if you want, but the cake will not come out quite as high. And it's very pretty the way it comes out when it's done in the 8-inch. This is a typical Tuscan dessert you'll find all over Tuscany, in trattorie, in grandmother's homes, in little bakeries, very typical. So we're going to set aside our buttered, then with a layer of breadcrumbs and apple pan over here while I mix the main ingredients. So in one bowl we have 1 package of dry yeast, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of sugar. So as I said, not very sweet, not overly sweet. 1/4 cup of milk. I always use whole milk when I'm baking. It just gives a nicer texture to the cake. And 2 egg yolks. Now I've reserved the 2 egg whites because we're going to use them shortly. So this, you don't need to use a mixer for this. We're just going to stir this gently until all the ingredients are mixed in. Like I said, this is a very quick, simple dessert, but really delicious. So we'll incorporate all our flour and sugar with the egg yolks to get a nice dough that's going to go over these apples. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add the whipped egg whites. So we'll take our 2 egg whites and beat them until they're nice and fluffy. So look at that. We have a perfect, beautiful meringue. Remember when you're beating egg whites to always use a bowl that is narrow and deep, because the consistency of the egg whites against the walls is what makes the egg white fluffy and a perfect meringue like that. Look at that perfect meringue. Perfect. Look at the texture. It's no water. I can tilt it. Nothing's coming out. That's what I like to see. Now we're going to take our meringue and we're going to incorporate it gently into our dough for our apple cake. This is going to give, of course, the dough the lightness and the airiness combined with the yeast to make it rise to a beautiful height on top of the apple. So we're just going to incorporate it, making sure to do this gently, because you don't want to break your meringue after you've beaten it. You want it to retain that airiness and softness. Incorporating all the dough. Literally, this is a delicious dessert you can make in 20 minutes or less. It only cooks for 40 minutes, so an hour from preparation to finish. Let's say you have unexpected company, or it's a Sunday and you want to make a special dessert. This apple cake is perfect, especially in the fall. Okay, so now we have the meringue nicely incorporated into our dough. We're going to take our cake and just very gently place the batter or dough on top of the apples. And I'll get a clean spatula, get all the dough off, and then flatten this. This cake has a wonderful texture and a nice, lovely, semi-crunchy flavor from the apples that are going to get slightly soft. There you go. Look at that, simple, easy. This is typical country rustic Italian, the best kind of Italian cooking that there is. This is the type of cooking my two grandmothers did and all grandmothers in Italy do, Tuscany and every region. Now we're going to place this in a 375-degree oven for 40 minutes. Okay, so our apple cake is done cooking. Oh, here it is. Oh, it smells delicious. Look at the beautiful dough has risen perfectly. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let this cake cool, and then we're going to flip it so the apples will be on top. Eccolo. I flipped the beautiful Tuscan apple cake, and there it is. This is just a perfect size, 8-inch, small, not exaggerated. It's a perfect dessert when you don't want to make something big and elaborate, and it's always delicious. Country rustic Italian, Tuscan apple cake. Buon appetito. Tutti a tavola. Ciao ciao.